Hey guys, King of Charmatters here. Today I'll be your judge, your jury, and your mental health therapist. Today's video is about One Piece. But before we get started, this is full of spoilers. So if you haven't watched or read One Piece's anime and or manga, the Marineford arc, post-war arc, or Dressrosa arc, you might want to skip this video. Otherwise, welcome to the video. I see a lot of content out there that highlights Luffy's trauma as a result of Dace's death in the Marineford arc. Unfortunately, none of those creators are mental health professionals. So, as a practicing mental health therapist, I will analyze and explore Luffy's severe trauma in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Since I do practice, I can ethically and professionally give guidance and diagnosis on why Luffy is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Alright, for every video, I will be using the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or shortly known as the DSM-5. So this is every psychotherapist's Bible. When you are diagnosed with mental illness, etc., this is what every psychotherapist will use. And for post-traumatic stress disorder, here are the diagnostic features. So essential features of post-traumatic stress disorder is the development of characteristic symptoms following exposure to one or more traumatic events. So some things like fear, helplessness, or horror are no longer part of the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. And the clinical presentation of PTSD varies. Some individuals, fear-based re-experiencing, emotional and behavioral symptoms may predominate. In others, anhedonic, which is basically the lack of pleasure, or dysphoric, unhappiness, feeling uneasy or unwell, that's what dysphoric mood states. This is what Luffy essentially experiences the most in his PTSD. So for this, it may be incredibly negative cognitions may be most distressing. Some individuals, arousal and reactive external symptoms are prominent, while in others, dissociative symptoms predominate. So it can basically, that just means it can vary. But some individuals might exhibit combinations of these symptom patterns. So one might be more predominant than the other. You might see more anhedonia, you might see more dysphoric, or a combination of both. In this instance for Luffy, he leans more towards the dysphoric mood states, in the meaning of that he feels more uneasy, unhappy, and unwell as a result of Ace's death. Here's the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. With every mental illness, there is a criteria that the client must meet in order to be diagnosed. For post-traumatic stress disorder, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways. As you see, Luffy already meets A2, witnessing in person the event as it occurs to Ace. So, since Ace's death, he witnessed it in person, he meets the criteria for A.
Don't do it! Don't do it! Strap, calm down! He's gonna destroy the ship! Where's Ace? Sorry, Luffy. I tried. But looks like this is as far as I can go.
Our next criteria is criterion B, the presence of one or more of the following intrusion symptoms associated with the traumatic events, beginning after the traumatic events occurred. As you see, Luffy meets this criteria by criterion B2. Recurrent, distressing dreams in which the content and or affect of the dream are directly related to the traumatic events. Luffy also meets criterion B3, dissociative reactions, e.g. flashbacks in which the individual feels or acts as if the traumatic events were recurring. Such reactions may occur on a continuum, with the most extreme expression being a complete loss of awareness of present surroundings. Luffy also meets criterion B5, marked physiological reactions to internal or external cues that symbolize or resemble an aspect of the traumatic events. For B3, as you saw over there, he's having a flashback, an intense flashback where Ace's death just puts him in complete disarray. As for B5, you saw that Luffy looked on his hand with blood on it, his own blood from the bandages, but he also, that symbolized when he put his hand over Ace's hole on his back when Akainu punched him with the magma, and he saw blood on his hand. So that is the external cue that symbolized the aspect of the traumatic event of Ace's death.
Maybe I dreamt the whole thing.
Next criteria is criterion C. Persistent avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic events beginning after the traumatic events occurred, as evidenced by one or both of the following. Luffy meets this by C1. Avoidance of or efforts to avoid distressing memories, thoughts, or feelings about or closely associated with the traumatic events. Luffy is persistently avoiding distressing memories of Ace's death. This is proven by his phrase, "Maybe I dreamt the whole thing," and in the previous clip where he is searching for Ace.
Me! King of the Pirates! What a joke! Look at me! I'm useless! I'm too weak!
For the next criterion, we have criterion D. Negative alterations in cognitions and mood associated with the traumatic events, beginning or worsening after the traumatic events occurred, as evidenced by two or more of the following. Luffy definitely has D2, persistent and exaggerated negative beliefs or expectations about oneself, others, or the world. E.g., I am bad, no one can be trusted, the world is completely dangerous, my whole nervous system is permanently ruined. Number 3, persistent, distorted cognitions about the cause or consequences of the traumatic events that led the individual to blame himself or others. Obviously, he meets D4, persistent negative emotional state. Fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame. For number 2, this one's painfully obvious. As you see on the scene, he says, "I'm the king of the pirates, what a joke." So, he already meets the thing as I am bad. For D3, I blame myself. Why? How can I do anything about it? And as you saw, he says, I'm too weak. So he blames himself, obviously. And of course, through explaining all that, number 4, plenty of guilt and shame, probably definitely some horror in there. Of course, his brother died. And I could probably find more for the other ones, the other numbers, but as you see, it's only 2 or more, and Luffy definitely meets criterion D.
I cannot. Although I understand your pain, I will not allow you to hurt yourself anymore. You bastard! Shut up! Say one more word and I'm gonna crush you!
Next, we have criterion E. Marked alterations in which arousal and reactivity associated with the traumatic events, beginning or worsening after the traumatic events occurred, as evidenced by 2 or more of the following. Now, Luffy obviously has E1 and E2, irritable behavior and angry outbursts with little or no provocation, typically expressed as verbal or physical aggression towards people or objects. And number 2, reckless or self-destructive behavior. In this case, Luffy is gravely injured. He is injuring himself, and earlier, if you watch the earlier episodes, Trafalgar Law says if he continuously loses blood, he can die, because he needs rest, because he's severely injured after the Marineford arc. And of course, the behavior and angry outbursts in which he's literally destroying the island, and his aggression towards Jinbei.
I'm sorry, Sabo, but I saw Ace die and I couldn't do anything to help save.
And last but not least, we have the final 3 criteria. We have criterion E, the duration of the disturbance is more than 1 month. Criterion F, the disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in relationships with parents, siblings, peers, or other caregivers, or with school behavior. And criterion G, the disturbance is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance, e.g., medication or alcohol or another medical condition. As you saw in the clip, for criterion E, It has been past a 2-year time skip, and Luffy still blames himself for Ace's death in some way, shape, or form. It's also striking here the words that he says. The first thing he says, "But I witnessed Ace die." That shows you that the trauma is still there, and unfortunately PTSD is not curable. So Ace's death will likely haunt Luffy for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, it seems that even after all this time through the time skip with everything, there's still some of those feelings and all of that. As you see, after Luffy does meet with Sabo, he's crying uncontrollably. That just shows the sadness and all of the guilt that still is present within Luffy. Of course, F, that's directly with Jinbei. When Luffy was fighting with Jinbei, Jinbei and Luffy were very tight-knit, and Jinbei was willing to do anything to protect Luffy. And you just saw how angry Luffy was after Jinbei tried to intervene with his grief that Ace had died at Amazon Lily. And with G, of course, Luffy doesn't take drugs. I don't even know if drugs would go right through him, but while he does take sake and alcohol, it's not his trauma isn't due to the physiological effects of alcohol or the excessive amount of food he has on a daily basis. And now we have to specify whether Luffy's PTSD is with dissociative symptoms, the individual symptoms meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, and the individual experiences persist or recurrent symptoms of either of the following: depersonalization or derealization. I'm gonna tell you right now, they doesn't have either of them, so I'm not gonna bother reading both of them, but Luffy does not have, this would be without dissociative symptoms. So you also have to specify is with a delayed expression. If the full diagnostic criteria are not met until at least 6 months after the event, although the onset and expression of some symptoms may be immediate. In this case, Luffy's was immediate. Right after he came out of coma, his symptoms started to explode. So he does not have a delayed expression, so it'd be without delayed expression. And of course, if this is the first time you've ever heard of PTSD or you've ever heard about severe trauma from a mental health professional lens, yes, it can come years, more months after you've had the event. And with all that being said, Luffy's official diagnosis would be Posttraumatic Stress Disorder 309.81 F43.10 without dissociative symptoms and without delayed expression.
May be gone, but you still have something left in this world to treasure, don't you?
My crew! I still have my crew!
As mentioned previously, post-traumatic stress disorder will never go away as there is no cure. There is also no power shown in One Piece that has cured mental illnesses thus far in the story. While Luffy's PTSD will never go away, he is saved from a harsh life of co-occurring depressive mental health disorders thanks to Jinbei's reminder that while he lost his brother, he still has his pirate crew. Co-occurring means you can be diagnosed with more than one mental illness at once. With the motivation to ensure that nothing ever happens to someone he loves ever again, Luffy trains vigorously in the next 2-year time skip. And he eventually reunites with his crew who ultimately saved Luffy's life. If you like this content, do me a huge favor, like and subscribe and comment if you'd like me to cover the mental illness and diagnosis of another anime character. Make sure y'all take care of yourselves, your loved ones, and I will see you on the next video.